Lizzo showed up to a Detroit rally in the name of Harris Walls and gave a glowing endorsement where she said this.
I'm so proud to be from this city. You know, they say if Kamala wins, then the whole country will be like Detroit. Okay? Proud like Detroit. Resilient like Detroit. I'm so proud to be
proud like Detroit, resilient like Detroit, poor like Detroit, dangerous like Detroit, undereducated like Detroit. That's, I think, what people are talking about. I think Lizzo might have seen a Fox News clip where Brett Baer or somebody said, you know what, I think the country's gonna look like Detroit if Kamala wins. And I guess she took that as a compliment. I don't think they meant proud like Detroit, but Lizzo wants to run with it and say that this is what the country is going to look like. Let me lay out a little picture for you of what people mean when they say the country's gonna look a little bit like Detroit if Kamala wins. Let's take a look at that. Proud like Detroit. It's gonna look a whole lot like the streets of Detroit. Now, I'm from Los Angeles. This looks even worse, to be honest. If she said, you know, if Kamala wins, the whole country's gonna look a lot like Los Angeles, I'd be like, okay, well, it's better than Detroit. That's wild to me. So I don't know what she thought she was doing there. But if you do a little quick Google search, okay, into the most dangerous cities in the United States, what's there at number 2? Capital D, Detroit, okay? And I do actually theorize, I stand by what Lizzo said there. I do think if Kamala wins, our country is gonna look a whole lot like Detroit. It's probably gonna look like drugs just being funneled through the southern border as they have been under this last 3.5 years under the Biden-Harris administration, where she was the border czar, and the border czar allowed our illegal immigration rate to what? Quadruple? Allowed tons of fentanyl and other drugs to just fly through our southern border, led to an even worse drug crisis in our country these past 3.5, 4 years. I think it would look a lot like that. She's allowed gang members, people who are involved with these cartels, terrorists into our country that are now running around. So yeah, it probably is going to look dangerous like Detroit. In fact, probably more dangerous than Detroit if we allow her to take leadership as the president of the United States. We also saw that during the BLM riots of 2020, Kamala said they're going to be out there, you know, they're not going to stop, and they shouldn't stop, because we need change in this country. So you have that to look forward to if Kamala Harris becomes president. So yeah, we will be looking a lot like Detroit in that sense. If you do another quick Google search to look up the poorest countries in the United States, there we go, Detroit. So yeah, under a Harris-Walls economy, if it's anything like a Biden-Harris economy, the country's probably gonna look like a lot like Detroit. We're going to be experiencing the same rate of inflation, if not more. You're going to be crying when you go to pump your gas, when you go to the grocery store. They're going to try to inflate wages, which will probably destroy our economy even further. They'll release a new Inflation Reduction Act and inflate things even more. And when you're struggling and you need something and you're asking, matter of fact, begging the government for help. Let's use an example like Hurricane Helene. She'll say $750 of immediate relief. And let's look over to Lebanon and Israel and Ukraine and send them $100 billion. Why not, guys? Well, let's do that. So yeah, the United States is going to look an awful lot like Detroit. You also have this out of Detroit. Only 5% of Detroit 8th graders read at a proficient level. Detroit's education system right now is looking pretty abysmal. And yeah, I think America's going to look an awful lot like Detroit if Kamala Harris becomes president, because she doesn't care about American education. She doesn't care about how abysmal American education looks at this very moment. Our literacy rates are just absolutely tragic. Kids are getting in trouble and are addicted to phones and jewels. Like, just the craziest stuff is happening at our schools right now. Never mind the fact that we are injecting leftist ideology and the leftist agenda into their schooling and teaching them about sexual orientation and gender theory, gender identity, talking to them about transitioning and seeing record rates of young people identifying on the LGBTQ spectrum or calling themselves non-binary and trans. Yep, I guess our country's gonna look a whole lot like Detroit. So thank you, Lizzo, for that enlightening bit of commentary and what you thought was a wonderful endorsement of Kamala Harris.
We were talking about this a little before. Like, do you think from Lizzo, is it more ignorance of this fact or probably some kind of pandering as well, or some combination of the two? And, you know, the stats speak for themselves. You laid out a bunch. I pulled up a few more here on Detroit. The third highest murder rate in the country, 40 per 100,000. Poverty rate, 30%, 3 times the national average. A child poverty rate, over 43%. 1 in 49 people are at risk of violent crime. 1 in 22 people are at risk of a property-related crime. Safer than only 1% of U.S. cities. An average of 41,000 reported crimes per year. So yeah, obviously not the best shining example that we want to make like the rest of the country. But I think that's the big question here. Is like, it's not just to crap on Detroit, because I'm sure there's lots of nice people there and people who cherish the city that they call home, but they deserve better. And what the question we should be asking is, like, when you have power, the power that you so desperately crave, the power that you are fear-mongering from other people, that they're saying, well, we can't let Trump have that power because your life will get worse. But you've had that power, and has life gotten better? And that's not just about Detroit. That's nationally, that's true. That's true of all of our major cities. And, you know, Elon Musk has been talking about this being the last election if the Democrats win, because of the importation of voters, and they want to make the whole country like a uniparty rule, similar to what we've seen in California. I don't know that might be a little bit, you know, overblown, but certainly from a trajectory standpoint, we seem to be headed in that way. But, you know, you look at California, you look at, they famously have that stretch of railroad that like billions and billions of dollars has been spent on, and it's a railroad in the middle of the desert that goes absolutely nowhere. And you contrast that to what Elon has just put out with his rocket landing, with his new robo taxis, and with his new robo buses or whatever, and his robots, and all that done in the private sector for a few $1 billion of investment that he's able to crank this stuff out. So, you know, we're at this crossroads here of like, do we want to continue pulling the lever for the people who have been in charge 12 of the last 16 years, the last 3.5 years in particular, in which the economy has tanked, which inflation has gone through the roof, in which crime is rising, despite what Pete Buttigieg is trying to tell you by saying that crime is down with the gaslighting. We've seen the updated FBI statistics have since been released, proving what we already know to be true from our very own eyes. So what's the future that we want? Is it time for a change? They keep running on this idea of like turning the page and it's time for a change, but y'all have been the ones in charge. And look at the state of our cities. I wonder how many years or elections in a row that Detroit has voted Democrat for its mayors, for its city council members, and Michigan as well at the state level for governance. And, you know, if we want change, then maybe we stop doing the crazy thing, which is pulling the lever for the same people over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah, you would think Lizzo would walk up there and say, if you vote for Kamala Harris, we're going to change Detroit. We're going to transform Detroit. We're all going to be living better. Not we're going to extend all of the shitty things that are happening in this place to the rest of the United States. What an interesting selling point to think that that is something that's positive for voters to hear. Even if you were in the best city in the world or in the United States, you would say we want to elevate this city even more, not get the rest of the United States looking exactly like what you have going on here. I literally think Lizzo walked on that stage and thought, Detroit has a bunch of black people. I'm black. We're being sold this idea that Kamala is black. So I want to tell these people that the United States is going to look a whole lot more like Detroit once she becomes president. I literally think it's as simple as that. And she hasn't thought about it any further than after the words came out of her mouth. She thought it right before she said the sentence and nothing after. And that's how we got Lizzo's endorsement that the U.S. is going to look a whole lot more like Detroit. Good job, Lizzo. My goodness.